Common Sense Finance with Mike Wiginton and Tom Farrell of HL Wiginton Capital Management, an independent investment and financial planning firm in downtown Jasper. Mike is a chartered financial analyst charter holder, and Tom is a certified financial planner professional. They are here to discuss and give their thoughts on current financial and economic matters. Now, with Common Sense Finance, here are Mike and Tom.
Welcome back to another edition of Common Sense Finance. I'm Tom Farrell.
Mike and Tom are registered with Steward Partners Global
It's election
Advisors.
season. We're not going to talk about any of that stuff, but a lot of talk around the deficits and whose plan is going to create a bigger deficit and whose plan is going to do. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
What's the title of this? I forgot already.
Debt and currency, should you care?
That's it.
That's the title.
Debt and currency, should you care?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is interesting. And I guess good enough that this comes up during the election season. But you see this stuff all the time, and you have people talk about it, around the coffee table. Of course, if you go in to meet with somebody, it's very common that you get off on politically tainted conversations about what's going on with the country, and this is crazy, and blah blah blah, and it's. And it's not so much that I necessarily disagree with their philosophy, and I may not at all, but it's just that they have things just dead wrong when they talk about a lot of these issues. Okay, there's a lot of myth and hype with it. So what I want to say right off the bat is I'm going to, which is unusual, and I don't like to do this. I'm going to read some things to you. Okay, some just data bullet points. I'm not going to read a paragraph or anything. But I want to say, okay, I'm using the Peter G. Peterson Foundation for these bullet points on these just financial facts, if you will. But you can get them anywhere on government sites. These are well published out on the internet. They're easy to come by. So don't think that this is the sole source or the most authoritative source. I mean, like I said, these are just these are a matter of published facts. So go look for yourself. So we'll start here. At the end of last year, so today's October the 10th of 24. Mm-hmm. So at the end of last year, at the end of 23, there was roughly 34 trillion, with a T as in Tom, of debt. It's a little over 34 trillion, but close enough to call it 34 trillion. So Oliver Stone is going to flash up the first pie chart, and I want to talk about that. So the first thing I want to do is I want to distinguish between debt held by the public and so-called intra-governmental debt. Okay? So debt held by the public is what you normally see your news stations talking about. All right, as opposed to those intra-governmental units like the Social Security Trust Fund that holds U.S. Treasuries or U.S. debt. Okay, so I just want to focus on that's held by the public. All right, and that's about 79% of the total. All right, the other 21% roughly is owned by our intra-governmental agencies. All right, so I want to talk about the 79. I want to focus on the 79%. All right, so of that piece, 2/3 of it is owned by domestic entities. All right, by domestic entities like pension funds, mutual funds, individuals, corporations here in the United States. The largest holder, but because foreign entities is in that 79%. And we're going to talk about other countries in just a second. But they're in that 79% you're talking about. But we're talking about the largest ones. The very single largest owner of public debt, of the debt held by the public, is the Federal Reserve. They're the largest holder by far. Okay. Now, it's a little weird to me, and I haven't researched this, as to why they get to be in the public as opposed to the intra-governmental units, like, again, Social Security Trust Fund.
Yeah.
All right? But the largest owner of U.S. debt is the Federal Reserve. And just so you know, if we just for a second, we flash over to the 21% that's held, the intra-governmental that owns 21%, the Social Security Trust Fund is the largest owner of debt there, okay? All right. Oliver Stone can flash up the next bar chart, all right? And you're going to look at this 79% still talking about the 79%, but the 2/3 of it that's held by domestic holders, as opposed to that's people in the United States versus foreign holders. All right, so we're going to talk about the foreign holders of the public debt here. All right, Japan, and what I would note is Japan's the largest foreign holder of U.S. debt. China's the next. If you combine, Japan owns about 1.1 trillion, and Japan, and these are all year 2023 year end, Japan's like 750 billion. So if you combine those two together,
So Japan and China is what
combine Japan, Japan owns 1.1 trillion of debt, of U.S. debt. China, 750 billion.
Okay.
But if you combine those two together, the Social Security Trust Fund owns dramatically more, significantly more. The Social Security Trust Fund is like 2.36 trillion. So they own significantly more Social Security Trust Fund than China and Japan combined. All right. Now, I want to just make one comment on that piece, because there's been a lot of conversation about it for some time now. You hear about, foreign holders are going to start dumping U.S. treasuries as a tactic, and so on and so forth. Well, I would just point out that I would say to you, and this is Mike Wiginton, that's a little bit of nonsense, because when you sell, that's when they talk about dumping, they're talking about selling a lot of it, okay?
Yep.
When you sell a whole lot of a thing, the price of that thing generally goes down, okay? And those are just basic laws of economics, right out of economics textbook, so that'll be my source for compliance, because, they don't, economics is a real body of study.
There's more
too.
sellers than buyers than,
So so there's nobody that would have an economic incentive to just lower the price of that thing that they're selling. More apt, what they would do, more probable what they would do is just let their mature. Not that they couldn't sell it for all various sorts of reasons.
Right. Just let them roll off the books and not replace them.
And not replace them. That's right. And quite frankly, to some degree, that's been happening for lots of reasons, and we're kind of going to talk about that right now, because this is all related to all this conversation about reserve currency, and most people don't even really know what that means. But a reserve currency is a currency that people have a lot of faith and confidence in, and they have a lot of faith and confidence in that currency. Because it's a stable store of value over time. All right, so it's just like you wouldn't want to own a thing, and we talked about this when we started talking about Bitcoin and why it fails every definition of a currency. All right, whatever it may or may not be, but you wouldn't want to put your paycheck. You're saving to buy a home, or maybe you're just putting your money in your checking account, direct depositing your paycheck, so you can buy groceries 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, before you get paid again. Well, you wouldn't want to put your paycheck into a currency that was going to depreciate, that you couldn't even buy half the groceries next week that you could buy, or at least you didn't have the faith that you could buy half the groceries next week as you could this week, okay? So stable store of value is a really important thing that we take for granted and don't even think, to the point we don't even think about it. So you're talking about economies that are large, developed, rule of law comes into play, okay, that protects private assets. So you've got that sort of confidence in the economy that is issuing that currency. So get a load of this. At one time, at one time, and you can find this anywhere. Investopedia is an okay. I don't use them, but they're just this is just a historical fact that you could pull from anywhere. At one time, the United States GDP, and this is, I think, shortly after World War II, represented 50% of the world's economic output. 50%. Okay. Now, some people would say, oh, yeah, that's great. That's a source of power. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, let me ask you a question. Do you think it's more desirable or less desirable to have a healthy world, and by healthy, I mean economically healthy, or a world that all the health is concentrated in one place, one or two places? Yeah. Do you want your trading partners to be economically healthy and stable? And this, I don't mean this as some sort of inflammatory question, but I mean more wars, less wars. What do you like more? More stability, less stability. But I would tell you that to a degree, I don't care. Yeah, I'm as pro-United States as anybody, or probably more than you know, just in a thoughtful way. That if a medicine comes out that cures cancer, all right, I don't care who produces it, so long, I mean, if it's legitimate, right? I mean, that's all the assumptions. I don't care. I want there to be we would all benefit. Our standards of living would go up if everybody's economically healthy and stable. I mean, I don't know who would, yeah. So what has happened is that there's been a lot of economic growth over the last 20 to 30 years worldwide. And now you see countries like China, like the Eurozone, India's on the rise. They need more of their own currency because their economies have grown. Right. So there are very real reasons why these countries wouldn't own day to day as much of U.S. debt as they would otherwise, 30 years ago. Right. That's all I'm trying to point out. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, all right? At the moment, there's really no threats to our position as a reserve, as the global reserve currency. We're still a very economically robust, maybe the most, you could argue, economy globally. We still have, even though there's a lot of argument about this, and I'm not putting down any of these arguments, I'm just saying that we still are a country that is seen as operating by the rule of law. Right. Okay? So that's where we're...
Relatively speaking.
Relatively speaking to the world stage. I've always said, that historically you could say that if you had and I'm just making this up for example's sake, so, whatever. If you want to call me or email me, you got my numbers and my contact information. Compliance will be the first people who want to talk about this. But if you got the Russian drug runner and the Chinese gun smuggler, and they want to do business with one another, okay, and I'm going to sell you the guns, you're going to sell me the drugs, okay, and I mean, because these are people of integrity, man, they care about, they're going to say that, well, I'm going to pay you in Russian rubles, or I'm going to pay you in Chinese yuan. Historically, it's like, I just don't think I want those rubles or those yuan. But I'll take, as much as I hate those people in the West, I'll take the U.S. dollars.
All they can get.
Because they don't trust the value and the stability of the yuan or the ruble. Now again, some of that's changing as certain of these economies come up and they mature and develop and so forth. But I mean that and I mean that in a bit of a humorous way, but it's also a lot of truth to that of how people look at what they're taking in exchange for what they're giving up, right, and what sort of confidence they got to have in it. We're going to flash up to some source material from usafacts.org, Matthew, even the Wall Street Journal, and a couple others that we can get some of those, provide some source material make it easier for folks to look that up. The global exchange of the global trade, global exchange and trade is not going to stop. It's going to ebb and flow. That's the nature of economic cycles. Economic cycles are a real thing because there's human beings that are imperfect. All right, and so I hope as more and more people, and I'm going to leave it on this, unless you, but you can please feel free to comment. And I used to when I was in an undergrad, an accounting student in undergraduate, I talked about this at the lunch table. And that was in the late 80s, mid to late 80s, and China was a full-fledged communist nation. And they're still run by the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, all these are, objective facts. But I said, if you want freedom, the thing that they need is those Chinese people need a taste of freedom, of liberty, of being able to make decisions for themselves. And over all these decades, they come to the United States and they've become westernized, which is one of the concerns that the Chinese Communist Party has voiced, been vocal about. But it's hard. It's hard to take that away from people. And so as they call themselves a market economy, they're not really truly market economies, but more so than they were. And as that continues to happen, then I see that the world stage is more healthy, it becomes more and more healthy, even though it may be in little bitty baby steps sometimes, and maybe we can take a step or two back, but it becomes more and more healthy. And if that means the world is demanding fewer U.S. dollars, buying less U.S. debt, then so be it. And you know what? The United States needs to get its house in order, I would say, to reflect that. You understand what I'm saying? That's how I see it.
That's it.
That's all I have.